my mom said. Your sister deserves the inheritance more than you. And handed her everything. I smiled and walked away. Months later, when she begged me for help, I still remember the way my mother said it. No hesitation, no guilt, just a simple fact, as if she were reminding me that my sister's favorite color was pink. Your sister deserves the inheritance more than you. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was just so predictable. After years of being the afterthought, the expendable one, the invisible son, here was the final proof of where I stood. Or rather, where I didn't. Across the room, my sister, Ashley, sat with a perfectly rehearsed look of surprise. As if she hadn't already known. As if she hadn't spent years being my mother's favorite, the one who got everything while I got nothing but expectations. All of it? I asked, my voice calm. My mother nodded. Yes, all of it. The house, the money, everything your father left behind. Ashley needs it more than you. You'll be fine. That was the part that stung the most. You'll be fine. I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a small share, just a nod that I existed, that I mattered. But I didn't even get that. Instead, I got a verdict that had been decided long before my father's will was even read. Ashley needed it more. I looked at them both. My mother, firm in her decision, and my sister, playing at innocence but already making mental notes on how she'd spend the money. I smiled. Not the kind of smile that came from amusement, but the kind you give when you realize just how free you are. Okay, I said, standing up. I hope you both enjoy it. Then I walked out. No shouting, no fighting, no begging. I just left. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. Walking away felt good. It felt like cutting the final thread tethering me to people who had never really seen me as part of their family. I didn't slam the door or make a scene. I just left. I moved on with my life, something they never expected me to do. The truth was, I had spent years building myself up without their help. While Ashley was given everything, cars, tuition, vacations, I had learned how to survive on my own. I put myself through school, worked late shifts, and learned the value of every dollar. It wasn't an easy life, but it was mine. And that was the difference between us. Ashley had always been handed lifelines. I had learned how to swim. Months passed without a single word from them. No calls. No texts. And I was fine with that. I poured everything into my business, a small but growing tech consultancy, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. Then, out of nowhere, the first crack appeared. I was at my office when I got a text from an old family friend, Mark. We weren't particularly close, but his message was simple. Hey man, is everything okay with your mom and sister? Heard something about financial trouble? I frowned. Trouble? That didn't make sense. Ashley had inherited everything. The house. The money. My father had left a decent fortune behind, not billions, but more than enough to set her up for life. Still, something about the message lingered in my mind. Later that evening, I checked Ashley's social media out of curiosity. I hadn't looked at it since cutting them off, but now, scrolling through her profile, I noticed something strange. The lavish vacations? Gone. The designer shopping sprees? Now replaced with vague quotes about hard times building strong people. That's when it hit me. She had blown through it. I leaned back in my chair, shaking my head. I should have known. Ashley had never been responsible. Money flowed through her fingers like water. She was always spending, always upgrading, always showing off. And if the money was gone, that meant only one thing. Sooner or later, they were going to come knocking. And this time, I would be ready. It took exactly 2 weeks. I was in the middle of reviewing contracts when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. My mother. I let it ring. A minute later, another call. Then another. I waited until the 4th attempt before answering, keeping my voice calm. Hello? There was a pause on the other end, then a carefully measured sigh. You don't pick up the phone for your own mother now? Ah. There it was. The guilt. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my tone neutral. I've been busy. Another pause. Then, as if she couldn't hold back any longer, she said, We need your help. I closed my eyes for a brief second, barely suppressing the smirk forming on my lips. We? She exhaled sharply. Ashley's in trouble. The money, it's gone. She made a few bad investments, and things didn't work out. And now. What do you mean by gone? I cut in. Just gone, she said vaguely. It's not important how it happened. The point is, we're struggling. The house has a second mortgage now and… I almost laughed. A second mortgage? The house had been fully paid off when my father left it to her. How on earth did Ashley manage to mess things up this badly? And now you're calling me, I said flatly. You're the only one who can fix this, my mother said, her voice shifting into its usual tone of expectation. The same voice she used when she assumed I would just do things for her. How? I asked, just to hear her say it. She hesitated. We need money. I smiled. There it was. Let me get this straight, I said, keeping my tone calm. You gave everything to Ashley because she deserved it more. But now that she's ruined it, you're coming to me? Don't be petty, she snapped. We're family. I let that hang in the air for a moment before replying. Funny. I don't remember being treated like family when you handed everything to Ashley. You're being cruel, she hissed. Do you know how much stress your sister is under? Do you know how hard this has been on us? I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Us. Not her. Not Ashley. Us. They had always been a package deal. One I had never been a part of. I'll think about it, I said casually. You will? She asked, hopeful. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. Sure. Then I hung up. I didn't block her number. No, I wanted to see just how desperate they'd get. Because for the first time in my life, I was the one in control. It didn't take long for things to spiral. After I hung up, the texts started rolling in. At first, they were polite. Mom, just let me know when you have a moment to talk. I know we left things off on the wrong foot. Then they turned manipulative. Mom, I don't understand how you can be so cold to your own family. After everything I've done for you. And finally, outright demanding. Mom, you need to grow up and do what's right. We're drowning here, and you're just sitting on your money like a selfish child. Ah, there it was. The real her. I ignored them all. Then, one evening, as I was winding down after work, there was a knock at my door. I already knew who it was before I even looked. When I opened it, my mother stood there, dressed like she had just come from church, like this was some kind of moral intervention. Ashley stood behind her, arms crossed, her face carefully arranged into a look of exhausted suffering. I leaned against the doorframe. What a surprise. My mother didn't waste time. Are you really going to let us suffer? Define suffer, I said. Ashley rolled her eyes. Mom, this is ridiculous. He's obviously enjoying this. She wasn't wrong. I was. My mother tried a softer approach. We raised you to be better than this. I let out a small laugh. Did you? Because I remember being told I wasn't worth an inheritance. That Ashley deserved it more. What changed? Things got complicated, my mother said, pressing her lips together. Ashley sighed dramatically. Look, I know I made some bad choices, okay? But I didn't expect everything to go downhill so fast. The market tanked, the housing bubble popped, and I had some. She hesitated, then mumbled. Unexpected expenses. Let me guess, I said. Luxury cars, vacations, bad investments and pyramid schemes? Ashley's face flushed. It wasn't a pyramid scheme. It was network marketing. I actually laughed at that. My mother took a deep breath. You're successful. You don't need all the money you have. But your sister needs it more. I finished for her. Yeah, I've heard that before. My mother's face twisted in frustration. So you're just going to let us lose everything? Yes, I said simply. They both froze. As if it never occurred to them that I might actually say no. My mother blinked, like she couldn't comprehend it. But we're family. I tilted my head. Are we? Ashley let out a frustrated noise. Oh my God, you're so bitter. Just admit that you're holding this over us for revenge. Of course I am, I said cheerfully. You two never had a problem stepping on me when I was struggling. Now that the tables have turned, you suddenly want to talk about family? Ashley looked like she was about to explode, but my mother put a hand on her arm. Please, she said, her voice quieter now. We need help. I studied her. For the first time, there was something genuine in her voice. She was actually scared. I could have ended it right there. I could have told them to leave and never come back. But that would be too easy. Instead, I smiled. I have an idea. Ashley narrowed her eyes. What? You'll see, I said. I'll call you tomorrow. Then I shut the door. Because if they thought I was going to just hand over my money, they were in for a surprise. The next morning, I made the call. My mother answered on the first ring, her voice thick with forced patience. I knew you'd come around. Ashley scoffed in the background. Took him long enough. I smirked. Oh, you have no idea what's coming. I've thought about your situation, I said. And I'm willing to help. There was a pause, then a sigh of relief. I knew you wouldn't abandon your family, my mother said. But, I continued, there are conditions. Ashley groaned. Oh, here we go. I ignored her. First, the house. It's still in your name, right? Yes, my mother said hesitantly. Good. You're going to sell it. Silence. Then, an explosion. Are you insane? Ashley shrieked. That's our home. I stayed calm. You're drowning in debt, right? You can't afford the mortgage. Selling the house will give you cash to pay off what you owe. My mother hesitated. But where would we go? I hear apartments are nice, I said. Ashley's breathing was heavy through the phone. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I ignored her again. Second, Ashley, you're getting a job. Her voice shot up an octave. I have a job. You mean the influencer nonsense? I said. That's not a job. You're going to get a real one. One with a paycheck. One that doesn't rely on people being dumb enough to buy overpriced junk from your links. Ashley sounded personally offended. You wouldn't understand. You work a boring job. Yeah, I said. But my boring job lets me pay my bills. My mother, sensing that I wasn't backing down, tried a gentler approach. Sweetheart, there has to be another way. We don't need to sell the house. Maybe just a loan. A small one? Just to get us back on our feet? I almost laughed. Oh, you mean like the money Dad left? The money that was supposed to keep you on your feet, but instead went to luxury shopping and bad investments. Ashley huffed. God, you're such a martyr. Not really, I said. I'm just someone who learned to stand on my own instead of expecting handouts. So that's it? My mother asked, her voice now shaky. Either we sell the house and Ashley gets a job, or you won't help us? That's it, I confirmed. I could feel them squirming on the other end of the line, weighing their options. They had expected me to hand over money with no strings attached. But now they had to choose between swallowing their pride or losing everything. You have 48 hours to decide, I said. Take it or leave it. Then I hung up. And for the first time in my life, they were the ones waiting on me. I expected them to call back in a few hours, maybe even the next day. They didn't. For 2 full days I heard nothing. No angry texts from Ashley, no guilt-tripping voicemails from my mother. It was almost peaceful. I figured they were scrambling, looking for some other way out. Maybe they thought they could convince someone else to bail them out. Maybe they were hoping I'd cave. But I didn't. Then, on the 3rd day, my mother finally called. I picked up, keeping my voice neutral. So? She let out a long, suffering sigh. We'll sell the house. I leaned back in my chair, unsurprised. Good choice. But Ashley. I'm not getting a stupid job. Ashley cut in, her voice sharp. That's not happening. I smirked. Then neither is my help. You're being ridiculous. She snapped. You don't get it. I can't work some minimum wage job. I have a brand to protect. I let out a low whistle. A brand? You mean those staged photos of you drinking lattes and designer outfits you can't afford? She huffed. You don't understand my industry. You're right, I said. Because I have a real job. My mother jumped in, trying to mediate. Sweetheart, maybe there's a compromise. There isn't. I interrupted. Ashley needs to take responsibility for her life. If she refuses, then I'm out. You can't be serious. Ashley scoffed. You're going to let your own family suffer just because I don't want to waste my time flipping burgers. I shrugged. Your call. Silence. Then my mother spoke again, quieter this time. We'll handle it. Ashley gasped. Mom. Enough, Ashley. She snapped, and for the first time and maybe ever, I heard actual frustration in my mother's voice. He's right. We can't keep living like this. We need to make changes. I raised an eyebrow. That was unexpected. Ashley muttered something under her breath, then hung up. I smirked. For the first time in my life, I had won. But this wasn't over yet. Because soon, they were going to learn that starting over was a lot harder than they thought. A week later, the house went on the market. I kept tabs on the listing, watching as the price dropped lower and lower. Turns out my sister's dream home was overpriced, and with the market cooling, they weren't getting nearly as much as they expected. I didn't gloat. Not outwardly, at least. Ashley, on the other hand, was not handling things well. She had gone full meltdown mode on social media. First, she posted cryptic quotes about fake people and how betrayal teaches you who really matters. Then, when that didn't get enough sympathy, she started making vague posts about how she was going through a really tough time but staying strong. When that didn't work, she started outright complaining. Ashley's post, "It's disgusting how selfish some people can be. Family is supposed to support each other, not turn their backs the second things get hard. But some people only care about money." The comments were full of sympathy. "OMG, who did this to you? You deserve so much better, babe. Some people don't understand loyalty." I rolled my eyes. Ashley always knew how to play the victim. A few days later, I got a text from an old friend of ours, someone who still kept up with my sister's nonsense. "Friend, dude. Check Ashley's story. You're gonna love this." I clicked over, and there she was, crying on camera. Ashley, the same woman who had scoffed at the idea of working a normal job, was now on video, voice shaking, sniffling between words. "I just don't understand how someone can be so heartless," she whined. "After everything I've done for him, he's just watching us struggle. Like we're nothing to him. I never thought my own brother would betray me like this." I actually laughed out loud. Betray her? She had everything handed to her, and she ruined it. And now, because I refused to clean up her mess, I was the villain? I clicked off the video and went back to my work. A few hours later, my mother called again. I answered, already knowing how this was going to go. "Let me guess," I said. "You saw Ashley's breakdown?" A long pause. Then, "She's struggling, sweetheart. She's embarrassed," I corrected. "She's never had to deal with consequences before. That's not struggling. That's reality finally catching up." My mother sighed. "I know this is hard for you, but..." I laughed. "Hard for me? Mom, I'm fine. I'm thriving. The only ones having a hard time are the ones who made bad choices." Her tone turned desperate. "What if she really can't handle this?" I raised an eyebrow. "Are you asking me to feel bad because Ashley might have to, work? Don't be cruel," she whispered. I took a slow breath. "I'm not being cruel. I'm being fair. For the first time in my life, I'm being treated like an actual person in this family instead of a backup plan. And you don't like it?" She didn't respond right away. Finally, she said, "I just want us to be a family again." I let that sink in for a moment. Because now she wanted us to be a family. Not when she gave Ashley everything. Not when she told me I'd be fine as she cut me out. Not when she let my sister live in luxury while I had to build my life from scratch. Only now, when she needed something from me. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Maybe you should have thought about that sooner." Then I hung up. Because for the first time, I was fine. And I wasn't about to let them drag me down with them. The silence that followed was satisfying. No calls. No texts. Not even a passive-aggressive social media post from Ashley. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one chasing after them, trying to prove my worth. They had finally realized that I wasn't going to save them. But then, about 2 weeks later, I got a text. "Mom, can we meet for coffee? Just you and me?" I stared at it for a moment, debating. Part of me wanted to ignore it. But another part of me, the part that still, against all logic, hoped she had learned something, was curious. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small cafe near my office. When I arrived, my mother was already there, a cup of tea in front of her, hands nervously wrapped around it. She looked tired, older somehow. She gave me a small, hesitant smile. Thank you for coming. I sat down, leaning back. What's this about? She exhaled slowly. I wanted to talk, without Ashley. That caught my attention. Go on. She hesitated, then said, I think I made a mistake. I blinked. I wasn't expecting that. She stirred her tea absent-mindedly, not looking at me. I should have been more fair with the inheritance. I thought Ashley would be responsible. I thought she'd take care of things. She let out a weak chuckle. I thought you'd be fine on your own. I studied her. Was this real, or was this just another attempt to pull me back in? She sighed. I've been enabling her, haven't I? I raised an eyebrow. What gave it away? The fact that she refuses to work, or the fact that she's publicly melting down because she has to live like a normal person? My mother flinched but didn't argue. That was new. She finally looked at me. I don't expect you to fix this. I just wanted to say I was wrong. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. Okay. So now what? She exhaled, looking down at her tea again. I don't know. And for the first time, I realized she really didn't. For years, she had been living in a world where Ashley could do no wrong, where I was just the other child, the one who didn't need attention or fairness. And now, that world had crumbled, and she didn't know what to do. I could have rubbed it in. I could have listed every wrong she had done to me, every time she had overlooked me, every time she had chosen Ashley over me. But I didn't. Instead, I just said, I hope you figure it out. She nodded slowly, as if she knew that was the best she was going to get from me. We sat there in silence for a few minutes, sipping our drinks. It wasn't warm, or emotional, or like some movie moment where everything magically healed. But it was something. And for now, that was enough. For a while, things were quiet. My mother had finally admitted she was wrong, something I never thought I'd hear, and while it didn't erase the past, it was a step in the right direction. Ashley, on the other hand, had gone suspiciously silent. No more social media meltdowns. No more passive-aggressive texts. Nothing. That should have been my first warning. One evening I got home from work and found someone sitting on the steps of my apartment building. Ashley. She looked different. Gone was the perfectly styled hair, the expensive designer clothes. She was wearing leggings and an oversized hoodie, her face makeup-free for the first time in years. I crossed my arms. What do you want? She let out a sharp breath. Can I come in? I raised an eyebrow. Why? She looked up at me, eyes tired. Because I don't have anywhere else to go. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. She sighed. The house finally sold. Mom moved into a small condo. She said I could stay with her for a little while, but... She trailed off, shaking her head. Let's just say, things aren't great between us right now. I had to bite back a smirk. Oh? The favorite child isn't so favored anymore? So let me get this straight, I said. You blew through the inheritance, ignored every warning, refused to get a job, and now you want me to take you in? Her jaw clenched. I don't want to be here, okay? Then don't be. She let out a frustrated sigh. You know what? Forget it. I should have known you'd still be holding a grudge. I tilted my head. A grudge? Ashley, you got everything. Everything. And now that you've lost it all, you want to act like I owe you something? She looked away. I just thought you'd understand. That you'd help. I studied her. There was no apology in her voice. No ownership of what she'd done. She wasn't here because she wanted to make things right. She was here because I was her last option. I sighed. Ashley, I'm not going to let you live with me. Her face twisted in frustration. So that's it? You're just going to let your own sister be homeless? I met her eyes, calm and steady. You're not homeless, Ashley. You have options. You just don't like them. She scoffed. What am I supposed to do? I shrugged. Get a job. Find a cheap apartment. Figure it out, just like I had to. She stared at me, waiting for me to cave. I didn't. Finally, she let out a bitter laugh and shook her head. Wow. You really don't care, do you? I smiled. No, Ashley. I just finally care about myself more than I care about fixing your messes. She muttered something under her breath, turned on her heel, and stormed off into the night. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely free. Ashley never came back after that night. I half expected more texts, more calls, maybe even another dramatic social media post about how her own brother abandoned her in her time of need. But nothing ever came. And that silence? It was the best thing I had ever heard. My mother and I stayed in occasional contact, but things were different now. She had finally realized that I wasn't someone she could call only when she needed something. And while I didn't cut her off completely, I kept my distance. One afternoon, months later, I got a text from her. "Mom, Ashley finally got a job. It's not much, but she's figuring things out." I stared at the message for a moment, then smiled. Good. Not because I was rooting for her, but because, for the first time in her life, she was learning how to stand on her own. I never replied. I didn't need to. Because by then, I had moved on. I had spent years waiting for my family to treat me like I mattered. Years hoping for fairness, for recognition, for some sign that I was more than just an afterthought. But in the end, I didn't need their approval. I had built my own life. My own success. My own happiness. And when they finally came crawling back, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to humiliate them or make them suffer. All I had to do was walk away. And that, in the end, was the best justice of all.